Forbes has released a rather very interesting insight report that tells you exactly how much the Indiana Fever's social media engagements are actually monetarily worth, either on X or YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, whatever. I mean, all these posts have a monetary value to them based on engagement.
Okay, this is wild. The Indiana Fever's social media just got valued at an insane $55 million, and get this, nobody else even comes close. Forbes dropped a report that literally has all the haters scrambling for excuses because let me break this down for you. The numbers do not lie. While everyone was busy arguing about who really matters in the WNBA, the actual data just came through and settled the debate in the most brutal way possible. Seriously, do you think one player can actually be worth this much to a team's entire social media value? But hold up, let's cut through all the noise and talk about what just went down, because this Forbes report is basically a nuclear bomb dropped on every single argument those old school WNBA fans have been making for months. The Indiana Fever's social media is valued at a mind-blowing $55.4 million. That's not a typo. That is not an exaggeration. That's what happens when you draft someone who genuinely moves the needle in ways this league has absolutely never witnessed before.
If you are a Caitlin Clark fan, if you're an Indiana Fever fan, this is something you already know. However, for the haters out there, the old WNBA fandom, many of you call them the slows, for those fans, they're in complete denial. We've tried to tell people Caitlin Clark moves the needle unlike anybody else in this league or everybody else in this league. It just sort of is what it is. Fans are coming to see one particular player, and along with that carries over the support to the entire team.
But hold up, before anyone even thinks about crying disrespect to other players or how we need to celebrate everyone equally, you have to understand we are talking about cold hard numbers here. This isn't just some random opinion or personal bias. This is a legitimate, in-depth study done by STN Digital and Zoom Analytics, and they tracked over 20,000 pieces of content across Instagram, X, Facebook, and YouTube for the entire season. They meticulously measured everything: impressions, engagements, and even what it would cost advertisers to get that same insane level of exposure through paid ad. And get this, the Fever absolutely dominated, coming out on top by a margin so massive it's honestly kind of embarrassing for everyone else.
They're worth a lot of money. They are worth a lot of money, and I can tell you right now, that's a little over 5 times higher than the next WNBA team. 5 times higher. Let's go down here. Just scroll down. The Indiana Fever's staggering $55 million social media evaluation speaks volumes.
So, second place went to the Dallas Wings, clocking in at $8.61 million. Now let that sink in for a second. The gap between first and second place is over $46 million. That is not a competitive race, folks. That's not even the same sport at this point. The Fever aren't just ahead. They're playing a completely different game with numbers nobody else can even touch. The Wings, by the way, had an incredible year themselves, with engagement up 505% and social value up 34.44%, and they still got absolutely demolished by that insane gap. Third place was the Las Vegas Aces at $7.64 million, which makes total sense since they're the dynasty team with multiple championships and undeniable star power. Fourth was the New York Liberty at $7.53 million, which also tracks because they're in the biggest media market in the country. But here's where it gets really interesting. Fifth place went to the Chicago Sky at $6.35 million. Remember all those constant debates about who was really bringing more attention to the league? Remember all those arguments about rookies, impact, and cultural relevance? Well, the numbers just answered that question definitively. And what blew my mind was, it wasn't particularly close. The fact that the Sky came in fifth, despite having a player who was supposed to be equally as impactful, tells you everything you need to know. The narrative all season was that there were two two players driving WNBA growth and bringing new fans to the league, but the social media value shows a massive $48.69 million gap between the Fever and the Sky. That is not a small difference. That is not margin of error stuff. That's a completely different stratosphere of impact and engagement.
Noticing the growing popularity of WNBA across social media, social agency STN Digital and analytics and measurement platform Zoom teamed up to quantify the league's online impact with a newly released WNBA social rankings and insight report. The research analyzes how every team performed across social media during the 2025 season and identifies which clubs and content pieces generated the most engagement, impressions, and estimated media value.
What's even more insane is that the Fever didn't just stop posting Caitlin Clark content when the season ended. No, they kept that engagement going, kept the content flowing, and kept giving fans a reason to interact with their social media. That's just smart business, right? When you have someone generating that insane level of interest, you don't take your foot off the gas. You keep feeding the audience exactly what they want and ride that wave for all it's worth. The study specifically looked at content posted between May 16th and September 11th during the season, and the Fever racked up an astonishing 38.73 million engagements, and get this, 1.117 billion impressions. Yeah, that's billion with a bit. To put that in perspective, that's more impressions than most professional sports teams get in an entire year across all their platforms. And remember, we're talking about the WNBA here, a league that has historically struggled just to get mainstream attention. But wait until you hear this. One of the most absolutely insane statistics from the report is that the Fever had a single YouTube video valued at $733 here to $33,594. One video, not a campaign, not a series. One single piece of content was worth $750,000 in equivalent advertising value. That's the kind of number that makes marketing executives lose their minds, because it screams just how engaged and active this fan base truly is. You don't get those numbers unless people are watching, sharing, commenting, and coming back for more. For context, that one video's value is higher than some WNBA team's entire social media worth for the whole season. Think about that for a second. One piece of Fever content is worth more than everything some franchises posted combined. That's not just winning, that's dominating in a way that completely changes how the entire league has to think about social media strategy and fan engagement moving forward. Let me break this down for you. The methodology behind these numbers is crucial. They use something called the social value metric, which calculates exactly what advertisers would have to pay to get the same exposure through paid media. So when we say the Fever's social media is worth $55 million, it literally means if companies wanted to buy that same number of impressions and engagements through traditional advertising, it would cost them $50. The Fever are getting that value organically just by posting content their fans want to see. And if that wasn't enough, this completely destroys the argument that the WNBA's growth is evenly distributed, or that multiple players are equally responsible for the surge in popularity. If that were true, you'd expect to see much closer numbers across the top teams. Instead, you have one team that's 5 times higher than second place. That's not parity. That's one player dragging an entire franchise into relevance and taking the whole league along for the ride, whether people want to admit it or not. Now, the Dallas Wings' massive year-over-year growth is worth noting. Increasing engagement by 55% is incredible, and a lot of that probably has to do with Sophie Cunningham's amazing social media presence and personality. She's been one of the most searched WNBA players and has landed sponsorships with major brands like Arby's because she knows how to market herself and create content people want to engage with. But even with that explosive growth, they're still nowhere near the Fever's number. That tells you just how far ahead Caitlin Clark's impact truly is. The crazy part is, the fact that the Chicago Sky finished 5th is probably the most shocking revelation in the entire report for people who believe the narratives being pushed all season. There was constant media coverage comparing two players and suggesting they were both equally transformative for the league, but the social media value shows a mind-boggling gap of nearly $49 million. That's not a close competition. That's not even a competition at all. One player is generating engagement and value at a level that literally nobody else in the league can match. Some people will try to argue that the Fever just had a better social media strategy, or that their content team is superior. And sure, there's probably some truth to that. STN Digital did work with the Fever on campaigns and content strategy, which likely helped maximize the value, but you can have the best social media team in the world, and if your players aren't interesting to fans, the content simply won't perform. The Fever's numbers are high because fans want to see Caitlin Clark content. They want updates, highlights, behind-the-scenes footage, and anything else related to her. The demand drives the supply, not the other way around. This report also highlights something the WNBA has been really reluctant to fully embrace: star power, Matt. The league has tried to push this egalitarian message that everyone is equally important and deserves equal attention, but you're probably thinking, that's not how sports fandom works. People connect with individual players. They buy jerseys of specific athletes. They tune in to watch particular stars perform. The sooner the WNBA accepts that and builds its marketing around its biggest stars, the faster the league will continue to explode. What's even more insane is the Fever's social media value is also a huge asset when it comes to attracting sponsors and negotiating partnerships. When you can show potential sponsors that your content reaches over 1 billion impressions and generates nearly 40 million engagements, you have serious leverage in those conversations. Brands want access to engaged audiences, and the Fever have proven they can deliver that at a scale no other WNBA team can match. That translates directly into massive revenue through sponsorships, advertising deals, and partnerships. It's also worth considering what this means for the Fever's future business decisions. When one player is responsible for generating this much social media value, you do whatever it takes to keep that player happy and on your roster. You build around them, you support them, you make sure they have everything they need to succeed, because losing them would be catastrophic for the franchise's bottom line. The Fever aren't just thinking about wins and losses anymore. They're thinking about engagement, impressions, social value, and all the business metrics that come with having a transcendent star. The Las Vegas Aces finishing third despite being the defending champions with multiple All-Stars shows that winning alone doesn't automatically drive social media engagement. The Aces are successful on the court, but they don't generate the same level of fan interest and content engagement as teams with more marketable personalities. That's an important lesson for the entire league. Championship banners are great, but they don't automatically translate to social media value if people aren't emotionally invested in your players. The New York Liberty being fourth is somewhat surprising given that they're in the largest media market in the country. You'd think being in New York would provide a massive advantage for social media growth, but location only matters if you have players and content that people actually care about. The Liberty are competitive and well run, but they don't have anyone generating Caitlin Clark levels of interest, which limits their social media ceiling, regardless of market size. So here's what's really happening. This report proves the WNBA's recent growth isn't as evenly distributed as the league wants people to believe. There's one clear driver of this increased attention and engagement, and the numbers back that up in ways that simply cannot be argued against. The Fever's social media value is 5 times higher than second place. Their content generates billions of impressions. Individual videos are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those aren't the numbers of a league experiencing broad-based growth. Those are the numbers of one team and one player operating at a completely different level than everyone else. For fans who have been saying this all along, this report is total vindication. For people who argued that multiple players were equally responsible for the WNBA's growth, the numbers are a harsh reality check. And for the league itself, this should be a massive wake-up call about where the attention and value are actually coming from. You can pretend everyone matters equally if you want, but the data tells a very, very different story. On top of that, the Fever's success on social media also creates immense pressure on other teams to figure out how to better engage their audience. If one team can generate $55 million in social value while everyone else is stuck in single digits, that means there's a huge opportunity being left on the table. Other franchises need to look at what the Fever are doing, why it works, and find ways to create their own compelling content that truly resonates with fans. Otherwise, the gap will only continue to grow. This report is also powerful ammunition for anyone arguing that certain players deserve higher salaries and better treatment from the league. When you can directly quantify the value someone brings to their franchise and the league through social media impact, it becomes a lot harder to justify paying them the same as players who generate a fraction of that engagement. The WNBA's salary structure doesn't account for individual star power and marketing value the way other leagues do, but numbers like these make it crystal clear that maybe it should. The estimated media value model used in this study is exactly how major brands and corporations think about social media ROI. They look at impressions and engagements and calculate what that exposure would cost through paid advertising. The fact that the Fever are generating $55 million in equivalent advertising value just through organic content is absolutely incredible from a business perspective. That's free marketing that would cost tens of millions to replicate through traditional advertising channel. The numbers are in, and they're not up for debate anymore. Caitlin Clark isn't just moving the needle for the Indiana Fever, she's operating in a completely different universe than everyone else in terms of social media value and fan engagement. If you want to keep up with the real stories behind the numbers, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're breaking down everything the mainstream media won't.